we're at that point where the economic inflection point is going to change, and that tends to be quite good for crypto. Everything is always different, but it's always similar. So the question about 2008 was different. 2008, we had a financial crisis. So we had another thing. It wasn't just the economy slowing down, but we had something much worse. And 2001 was much worse. We had the biggest stock market bubble in history that unwound. This time around, I'm struggling to see what that big thing is. Yes, we've had inflation, which is different to the prior cycles, but inflation is also driven by the business cycle, and it should come down over time. So I don't see the really terrifying outcome. Of course, some companies might go bust. People will lose their jobs. Maybe some weaker economies will suffer badly. But generally speaking, I'm not picking up, oh my God, we've got a debt crisis coming or something really bad. I think it is different. And so a lot of people are expecting the next leg down. Is this going to cause the crash? I mean, the market's already down. I mean, the Nasdaq's down 27%. It was down 35% or so. It's pretty much crashed once already, but people are like, can it go down 50%? Because they look back at 2008 and 2001 and said, see, it can do that. When you go back to other recessions like 1990, it was a 20% correction. In fact, even when the Volcker years, the famous time when Paul Volcker was raising interest rates and slaying inflation, the market fell 27%. So it wasn't the big one, but 1974, it fell 50%. So we don't know whether it's a 50% sell-off, which is usually driven by something much worse, or something around 30%, which is roughly what's priced in right now. I'm erring to the 30%, so i.e. the risk reward is looking more attractive than if we were in 2008, where we had something much worse going on. Back then, this was pre-Real Vision. So this was when I was writing, and I still write to this day, Global Macro Investor, my institutional research. I think people either ignored it or thought this is interesting, and people got involved. Because, our job is to look for really interesting opportunities that other people haven't seen. So a lot of people weren't so skeptical. The skepticism came later in about 2017 when retail investors got involved. And then a lot of people didn't like it because the returns have been so big. They're like, at all times, it's a bubble, because they didn't understand how this kind of very powerful technology worked. So those voices of dissent were much bigger in 2017 all the way through to today, because it's questioning people's very system of understanding of financial markets and what is technology and how do they work. They kind of think it's crazy that a bunch of us are happy to see the market go down 70% and think that's normal, and then go up 20x. They don't see those kind of things. So they don't understand it. So they're kind of fearful of it. But in the early days, people were much more like, this is interesting. Much like we're observing the rise of AI or what Elon Musk is doing in space. They're like, it's interesting. But when it becomes a big thing, they all go, no, this is crazy. The hard thing about the crypto ecosystem is there is so much happening all at the same time. I mean, they've just raised $60 billion in venture capital, and everybody's building out projects, whether it's lending markets, financial markets on DeFi, whether it's putting traditional financial markets onto blockchain rails, whether it's putting real estate onto blockchain, whether it's doing really interesting things with NFTs, such as ticketing. So we're seeing Ticketmaster has issued 10 million NFTs, the largest NFT issuer in the world. That's going on. We've seen Solana building a phone which integrates all Web3 in your wallets. You've seen, there's literally almost too much to keep on top of. So, how do you pass through all of that excessive information? You start looking, okay, what are the main chains that the activity takes place on? And the main place is Ethereum, and then places like Solana, Avalanche, Polkadot, and a few others. So that's how you kind of filter down. You see all of this stuff going on. You're like, oh, this is overwhelming. But then the great thing is what platforms they're being built on. And then we can invest in the underlying platforms and protocols. So if you think about it, what is macroeconomic investing? It's using the economy to understand the direction, the future direction of assets. Why does that happen? Well, simply, if the economy is booming, people have more money to spend, and it tends to be positive for assets. And if the economy is slowing down or negative, then you tend to find that asset prices don't do as well. Kind of makes sense. Some assets work the opposite way around generally. So usually when things are slow, bonds do very well, but equities do badly, for example. And the easy way to see this, well, it's not so easy because you can't do it without putting it in a spreadsheet. It's actually the year-on-year rate of change of almost every asset, whether it's copper, oil, the S&P 500, bonds, yields, anything. They're basically related to I use the Institute of Supply Managers survey, the ISM survey, which is a monthly survey that basically tracks GDP, so economic growth. And it shows you that as soon as you make these things year on year, they look identical to the economic cycle. And that's the kind of big unlock, is realizing the economic cycle drives all asset prices. If you know where that's going, you can kind of make forecasts about asset prices. Well, nothing is foolproof in this world, right? All we're trying to do is get probabilities in our favor to try and roughly assess. But here's what's simple, is if you look at a chart of the ISM over the last 50 years, it goes up and down in cycles. The economic cycle, we all hear that term. What it means is kind of, you know, that if it's rolling over, it's likely to go all the way to recession. It doesn't always happen, but your probabilities are high. And once you're in recession, it tends to start picking up again, and that gives you the green light to maybe buy some of these things. So in a very simple terms, you're looking, the 50 line in the ISM is roughly where it goes to contraction or expansion. If it's coming down and going through 50, you start to worry about recession. So currently, while we're doing this, I think the ISM is somewhere around 52 and on its way down. So we're starting to think, oh, there's probably a recession coming. And when it comes up through 50, you're kind of being given the green light. Once you've figured out the ISM and how it works, you can then find things that lead it. So that gives you an ability to forecast, okay, what it looks like. So currently I'm using a mix of the rise in interest rates, the rise in commodities, and the rise in the dollar. And it's like financial conditions. That's suggesting that the economic cycle goes almost immediately to recession and pretty sharp. And I think a lot of people are sensing that is happening. You're hearing it from companies. You're hearing it from a lot of people to say, yeah, it looks like we're going to recession. So the forward-looking stuff suggests we're about to go into a severe recession. So now you need to figure out, well, what are asset prices pricing in already? Because you can't trade on today's news. You need to trade on tomorrow's news. And really speaking, you need to trade 6 months out news. And so where are we? So if I look at the year-on-year rate of change that I talked about, if I look at the S&P 500, it's already pricing in about 42 in the ISM. So a full recession below that 47 level. Could it go a bit further lower? Yes, because my forward-looking indicators suggest the ISM could get down to 40 or so, maybe a bit lower. But we're kind of in the right zone to say, actually, a lot's been priced in. Could there be one leg lower? Maybe. But that means that as an investor, your spidey sense should be up saying, hey, is the opportunity coming here to buy when everybody else is fearful? So again, my forward-looking indicators suggest that the economy picks up maybe in the first quarter of next year. So in which case, the markets will start to forward look some of this. So it's actually a little bit of a tricky point in time today, but we're getting very close to the time where the markets will start saying, okay, I can see what's going to happen here. The economy is going to go into recession. The Federal Reserve will stop raising interest rates, as will the other central banks. And chances are things start reversing again. Generally, he who has cash in a recession is king, because you want to be ready when nobody else is, when everybody's being forced to throw all their trades out and stop themselves out from losing money. You want to be able to buy. So you kind of want to have cash ready, and then you want to see what the economy does, and then start to see, hey, are bond yields coming down? Are the Federal Reserve going to stop raising rates? Those are kind of signals that the future economy in a year's time is not likely to be as bad as what we're seeing coming in the next 3 to 6 months. And it's that transition that becomes very interesting for investors. So, you know, basically, if you're young, you should be risk seeking. If you're old, you should be risk avoiding. It's as simple as that. So if you are young, you should be looking at, okay, how do I take advantage of the sell-off in crypto and the sell-off in stock markets and technology stocks? Because those are the things that will drive returns over the next 10 or 20 years. But if you're older and you're retiring, you want to stay in cash for longer. You don't want to take as much risk because you don't have an income. So your grandparents don't have an income anymore. So it's just their pension. So they need to be careful, very careful with their pension. Their nest egg has to be protected at all costs.